The point I want to make now is that it is a premature celebration to claim that the battle against inflation has been won when it's obviously been lost. But everybody wants to pretend that inflation is back in the bottle, the genie, because what they really want is rate cuts. They're trying to lay a foundation where the Fed can have cover to cut rates, not because the inflation battle has been won, but because fighting that battle has collateral damage for a overly leveraged economy, particularly the US government, as interest payments on the national debt are exploding. And so there is massive pressure on the Fed to cut rates. So the Fed just needs an excuse. So it has cover to do that.
Jerome Powell's semi-annual testimony has once again highlighted a troubling disconnect between the Federal Reserve and Congress. Despite inflation temporarily declining to around 3%, Peter Schiff argues that this is merely a transitory phase. Schiff exposes how the Fed's reluctance to address fiscal policy and the continued government spending spree are setting the stage for even higher inflation and economic instability. Powell's evasive responses and the bipartisan political theatrics on Capitol Hill underscore a dangerous complacency. Instead of addressing the root causes of inflation, politicians are more focused on grandstanding. Schiff warns that the Fed's upcoming rate cuts will not be a victory over inflation, but a necessity to manage the collateral damage of an overly leveraged economy, especially with skyrocketing interest payments on national debt.
Jerome Powell's semi-annual testimony, where he goes up to Capitol Hill and supposedly he answers questions from the representatives and the senators on the banking committee, the finance committee. But it really is just an opportunity for the congressmen and women to just grandstand and make little mini speeches for the audience. They don't really get any answers from Powell. In fact, Powell won't even give any answers to any pertinent questions, which is the most ridiculous aspect of this farce. Because you would think that the main purpose of having the Congress question Powell would be to get his take on the legislation that they're considering. Like, hey, we're thinking about this spending plan or this tax increase or tax cut or this new regulation. How do you feel that it would impact, the economy? How would it impact inflation, interest rates? You would think that that should be the primary purpose of these meetings, right? So the people in the House and the Senate who are not necessarily there because they're great economists or financiers, because supposedly the Fed chairman got his job because he's the brightest of the bright, right? He's a super genius when it comes to finance and economics and money and inflation. And, that's why he's got this important job. And so you would think that these congressmen and women who may have very little knowledge about, economics and finance, here's their opportunity to kind of bounce some ideas off of Powell and find out, hey, how would this impact the economy? We know you're trying to fight inflation. So what would be the impact of this new legislation? Or what could we do, right? Could you give us some advice? Right? What would you suggest we do to help fight inflation? What recommendations would you have for us on fiscal policy, right? You would think that that would be the purpose, but no. Anytime anybody asks Powell to comment on how a particular piece of legislation, whether it's fiscal policy or just, a regulation, if they ask, well, how is that going to impact inflation? He says, well, I can't answer that. I'm not allowed to talk about that. I can't talk about fiscal policy because, it's not my job. I wasn't elected, right? I want to stay in my lane. What do you mean it's not his job? Of course it's his job. His job is to educate Congress so that they understand the consequences of the stuff that they're doing. To say that I can't comment on it, if Powell thinks that a particular piece of legislation is bad, right, is going to harm the economy, He's supposed to speak up. He's not supposed to say, well, I wasn't elected, so I can't talk. I mean, that's precisely why he can talk, because he wasn't elected. Look, these guys, Congress gets elected based on what the average American, right, thinks, which is doesn't know very much about economics, right, voting for these guys. So why not tell them the truth? Why not say, that's a bad idea. You should repeal what you just passed, or here's what you should do. He doesn't want to give any advice. I mean, he should be telling them, cut government spending dramatically. Look at these deficits. You're destroying the country. You want to know why there's so much inflation? Look in the mirror at all this government spending. But no, he just says, we take the fiscal policy as it's given to us. He said that multiple times. Like, we don't even care, right? Here I am, the chairman of the Federal Reserve. I couldn't give a damn about fiscal policy. It's just I take whatever I get, right? So if you want to hand me a $2 trillion deficit or a balanced budget, I'm indifferent, right? It doesn't matter to us, the Fed. We just take it as it's presented to us, and then we just do our job. No. He talked about Volcker again. He brought his name up about how he did a good job and bringing down inflation. But Volcker also was very critical of the deficit spending that was going on during the 1970s and early 80s. And he was very specific in his warnings that government spending needed to be reduced, that we can't fight inflation with just monetary policy, that we need fiscal policy as well. We need contractionary fiscal policy, not these massive deficits. But Powell refuses to comment, and it's mainly because he doesn't want to be critical, right? He doesn't want to be accused of being partisan by criticizing any piece of legislation. But by doing that, it's a cop-out, and he is doing a gross disservice, not only to Congress, but to the American public. He should be speaking his mind, not biting his tongue. I mean, I'm sure he has an opinion. So share it. Share it with people who supposedly don't know nearly as much as you do about economics and about inflation. So enlighten them. Tell them what they're doing wrong, because they're doing a lot of stuff wrong. But anyway, so let me get a little bit more into the specifics of the two-day event. And first of all, all of the Democrats, when they give their little speeches, right, each congressman or senator gets to talk before they ask questions. And in fact, they talk so long, it's frustrating. They use up so much of their time talking that they don't even give Powell a chance to say anything. He barely has a chance, which I want to hear his answers or how he evades answering the questions, but I don't even get a chance, because by the time the congressman is finished making his speech, his time is up, and then we got to move on to the next guy. But all of the Democrats are blaming, or rather, the Democrats are claiming the economy is great. One after another, we got a great economy, everything is great, and they credit Powell, but they also, of course, credit Biden. Thanks to Biden and his great policies, we've got this incredible economy with, a low unemployment, and inflation's coming down, and everything is great. On the other hand, the Republicans talk about how lousy the economy is, how high inflation is, and they blame that on Biden. They don't blame the Fed at all. Nobody is blaming the Fed for anything. Everybody is talking about how great Powell is, what a great job he's done, what a great job the Fed has done. But the Republicans want to say the economy is horrible, inflation is high, and not hold the Fed accountable for its part of causing that problem. Because, of course, the Fed is very much to blame. It's not just the deficit spending of Biden, it's the monetary policy of the Fed. And, of course, the Republicans never want to admit that a lot of the problem was caused prior to Biden becoming president, because just because we didn't see the inflation in the CPI when Trump was president doesn't mean that his deficit spending isn't partially responsible for the inflation that we're suffering now. Of course it is. And it's not just Trump, it's Obama and the Bushes. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. And of course, it's about to get a whole lot worse. You know, for all the congratulatory talk about how the Fed has succeeded, you know, Powell said in his prepared remarks that the Fed's tight monetary policy has really gone a long way in bringing inflation down from where it was to 3%ish, wherever it is, and that we're on a glide path to 2%, and really claiming credit without understanding that all we've done is had a temporary transitory decline in the inflation rate, and it's about to accelerate. The point I want to make now is that it is a premature celebration to claim that the battle against inflation has been won when it's obviously been lost. But everybody wants to pretend that inflation is back in the bottle, the genie, because what they really want is rate cuts. They're trying to lay a foundation where the Fed can have cover to cut rates, not because the inflation battle has been won, but because fighting that battle has collateral damage for a overly leveraged economy, particularly the US government, as interest payments on the national debt are exploding. And so there is massive pressure on the Fed to cut rates. So the Fed just needs an excuse. So it has cover to do that.